The day Mei Lin walked into Westbrook High School, she already knew something was wrong. It was the middle of October, and everyone else had been there since September. They had their friend groups. They had their lunch tables. They had their inside jokes and their routines. She had nothing but a new backpack and a knot in her stomach that wouldn't go away. Her father had gotten a job transfer 3 states away. He had sat her down at the kitchen table back in August and explained it like it was good news. A better salary, a bigger house, a fresh start. Mei Lin had nodded and smiled because that's what good daughters do. But inside, she felt like someone had reached into her chest and pulled out everything that made her feel safe. She left behind her best friend, a girl she had known since kindergarten. She left behind the dance team she had worked so hard to make. She left behind the neighborhood where she knew every shortcut, every friendly dog, every crack in the sidewalk. And now here she was, standing in the main hallway of a school where she knew absolutely no one, trying to find room 214 while hundreds of strangers rushed past her like she didn't exist. The first week wasn't terrible. It was just lonely. Mei Lin ate lunch by herself in the corner of the cafeteria, near the window where the light was good enough to draw. She had always loved sketching, and her notebook was filled with little drawings of faces, flowers, and imaginary places she wished she could escape to. It was the one thing that still felt like home. She noticed people looking at her sometimes. Not in a friendly way, and not in a mean way either. Just curious. The new girl. The one who showed up out of nowhere and didn't seem to talk to anyone. She heard whispers but tried to ignore them. She told herself it would get better. People just needed time to warm up to her, but then there was Jessica Reeves. Jessica was the kind of girl who walked into a room and made everyone notice. She was pretty in that perfect, polished way that seemed effortless but probably took hours. Her clothes were always the right brands. Her hair was always shiny and smooth. Her laugh was loud and confident, the kind that made other people want to laugh too. Even if they didn't know what was funny, she was also the kind of girl who decided who mattered and who the idea and single quotes. Mei Lin first caught Jessica's attention on a Tuesday afternoon. She was walking to her locker when she tripped over something and stumbled forward, barely catching herself before she fell. When she looked back, she saw Jessica and 2 other girls standing nearby. One of them, a tall blonde named Amber, was pulling her foot back with a smirk on her face. "Oops," Amber said. "Didn't see you there." The 3 of them laughed and walked away. Mei Lin's face burned with embarrassment. A few other students had seen what happened, but no one said anything. They just looked away and kept walking, like it was none of their business. That was the beginning. After that day, things started happening more often. Little things at first. Someone would bump into Mei Lin in the hallway, hard enough to knock the books out of her arms. She would find mean notes stuffed into her locker, calling her names she didn't want to repeat. Once, she came back from the bathroom to find someone had drawn an ugly picture on her desk with permanent marker. She never saw who did these things. But she had a pretty good idea. Jessica and her friends, Amber and a shorter girl named Tiffany, seemed to be everywhere. They sat behind Mei Lin in English class and whispered things just loud enough for her to hear. They pointed at her in the cafeteria and laughed. They made faces when she walked by, like she smelled bad or had something disgusting stuck to her face. Mei Lin didn't understand why they had chosen her. She hadn't done anything to them. She hadn't even talked to them. But that was the thing about people like Jessica. They didn't need a reason. They just needed a target, someone who seemed weak enough that they could push her around without any consequences. And Mei Lin, with her secondhand clothes and her quiet voice and her habit of eating alone, was the perfect target. She thought about telling someone. Her parents, maybe, or a teacher. But every time she tried to imagine that conversation, she felt sick to her stomach. Her father was so proud of his new job. Her mother was finally starting to make friends in the neighborhood. They seemed happy for the first time in months. How could she ruin that by complaining about some mean girls at school? Besides, what would she even say? That people were whispering about her? That someone tripped her once? It sounded so small when she tried to put it into words. Teachers would probably just tell her to ignore it. Her parents would worry and maybe make things worse by calling the school. No, it was better to stay quiet. It was better to just get through each day and hope that eventually Jessica and her friends would get bored and move on to someone else. That's what Mei Lin told herself anyway. But the truth was, it was getting harder to believe every morning. She woke up with a heavy feeling in her chest. The walk from the parking lot to the front door of the school felt like walking into a war zone. She never knew when the next attack would come or what form it would take. The uncertainty was almost worse than the actual bullying. At least when something bad happened, she knew what she was dealing with. But the waiting, the constant watching and worrying, that was exhausting in a way she couldn't explain. Her grades started to slip. She had always been a good student, but now she couldn't concentrate in class. Her mind kept drifting to what might happen next, what new humiliation was waiting for her around the corner. She stopped raising her hand to answer questions because she was afraid of drawing attention to herself. She stopped going to the bathroom during class because she was scared of running into Jessica and her friends when no teachers were around. Her mother noticed something was wrong. She asked Mei Lin one night at dinner if everything was okay at school. Mei Lin looked at her mom's hopeful, worried face and felt the words rising up in her throat. She wanted so badly to tell her everything, to let someone else carry this weight for a while, but instead, she just smiled and said, "Everything's fine. Mom, I'm just tired from all the homework." Her mother didn't look convinced, but she didn't push. And Mei Lin went up to her room and cried into her pillow, as quietly as she could so no one would hear. 6 weeks passed like this. 6 weeks of whispers and mean notes and lonely lunches. 6 weeks of pretending everything was fine when nothing was fine at all. Mei Lin started to feel like she was disappearing. Like the real her was getting smaller and smaller while the scared, silent version of her took over completely. She didn't know it yet, but everything was about to change. In just a few days, something would happen in the girls' bathroom near the east stairwell. Something that would break her in ways she never expected. But also something that would eventually lead to the most surprising moment of her life, sometimes the worst. Days are just the beginning of a story that turns out different than you thought. Mei Lin just had to survive long enough to see it. It was a Thursday afternoon, the kind of gray, cold day that makes everything feel heavier than it should. Mei Lin was sitting in her last period English class, trying to focus on what the teacher was saying about symbolism in the book they were reading. But her mind kept wandering. She was thinking about the weekend, about how she could finally have 2 whole days away from this place. About halfway through the class, she felt a familiar pressure in her stomach. She needed to use the bathroom. Normally, she would have just waited until class was over. She had learned to avoid the hallways and bathrooms during school hours whenever possible. But today the feeling was too strong to ignore. She raised her hand and asked for a hall pass. The teacher nodded without really looking at her and handed over the little plastic card. Mei Lin gathered her things quickly, stuffing her notebook into her backpack. She had learned never to leave her belongings unattended. Too many times she had come back to find her things messed with or missing. She walked down the empty hallway, her footsteps echoing off the walls. Most students were in class, so the building was quiet. She passed the main bathrooms near the cafeteria but kept walking. Those were always crowded between periods, and sometimes Jessica and her friends hung out there to fix their makeup or gossip. Instead, Mei Lin headed toward the east stairwell, to a smaller bathroom that hardly anyone used because it was so far from everything else. She had discovered this bathroom during her second week at the school. It had become her safe place, the one spot where she could be alone without worrying about running into anyone. She had never seen another person in there. Not once in 6 weeks. That's why she didn't think twice when she pushed open the door and walked inside. The bathroom was small. Just 3 stalls and 2 sinks with a long mirror above them. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in that harsh, unflattering glow that all school bathrooms seemed to have. Mei Lin let the door swing shut behind her and took a breath. Then she heard the voice. Well, look who finally showed up." Mei Lin's blood went cold. She spun around and saw Jessica stepping out from the last stall, a smile spreading across her face that didn't reach her eyes. Before Maylin could move, she heard the click of the lock behind her. Amber was standing at the door, her arms crossed, blocking the only exit, and there was Tiffany leaning against the wall near the sinks, holding up her phone with the camera pointed directly at Maylin. "What are you doing?" Maylin asked. Her voice came out smaller than she wanted it to. Jessica walked toward her slowly, like a cat playing with a mouse. "We've been waiting for you. You always come here during 7th period. Did you really think we wouldn't notice?" Maylin's mind was racing. They had been watching her. They had figured out her routine, her hiding spot, the one place she thought she was safe. And now she was trapped with no way out. "Please," Maylin said. "I didn't do anything to you. Just let me go." Jessica laughed, and Amber and Tiffany laughed with her. The sound bounced off the tile walls and made Maylin feel even smaller. "You didn't do anything to us?" Jessica repeated, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "That's the problem. You walk around this school like you're better than everyone. You don't talk to anyone. You sit in the corner with your stupid little drawings like you're too good for the rest of us." "That's not true," Maylin whispered. I don't care what you just," Jessica cut her off. "I'm so tired of looking at your sad little face every day. Someone needs to teach you how things work around here." What happened next felt like it lasted forever. Even though it was probably only 20 minutes, Jessica grabbed Maylin's backpack and ripped it off her shoulders. She opened it and dumped everything out onto the dirty bathroom floor. Books, pens, her phone, her wallet, everything scattered across the tiles. Then Jessica picked up the backpack itself and walked over to the toilet in the first stall. "No," Maylin said, moving forward. "Please don't." Amber grabbed her arm and held her back. Maylin watched helplessly as Jessica dropped her backpack into the toilet and flushed. The water rose and soaked through the fabric. Jessica laughed and flushed again for good measure. "Oops," she said, pulling the dripping bag out and tossing it at Maylin's feet, but they weren't done. Tiffany picked up Maylin's notebook from the floor, the one with all her drawings. She started flipping through the pages, making faces and showing them to Jessica and Amber. "Oh my God, look at these," Tiffany said. "What is this supposed to be? A flower? It looks like a 5-year-old drew it." "Please give that back," Maylin said. Her voice was shaking now. Those drawings were personal. They were the only thing that still made her feel like herself. Jessica snatched the notebook from Tiffany and looked at the pages with exaggerated disgust. "This is what you do instead of having friends. Sit alone and draw ugly little pictures? That's so sad. Actually, I think I'm doing you a favor." And then Jessica started ripping the pages out. One by one, she tore Maylin's drawings from the notebook and let them flutter to the floor. Some of them she crumpled up and threw at Maylin. Others she ripped into tiny pieces. Maylin felt something breaking inside her. Those drawings represented months of work, pieces of her heart that she had poured onto paper. And now they were being destroyed right in front of her eyes. And there was nothing she could do to stop it. The 3 girls kept going. They called her names that made her face burn with shame. They made fun of her clothes, her hair, her voice, everything about her. They told her she was worthless, that nobody would ever like her, that she should just disappear and do everyone a favor. Through all of it, Tiffany kept her phone up, recording everything. Maylin knew that video would probably end up online somewhere, another humiliation for people to laugh at. The thought made her feel sick, but she didn't cry. Something inside her refused to give them that satisfaction. She stood there with her arms wrapped around herself, staring at a spot on the wall, waiting for it to end. Her eyes burned and her throat ached from holding back the tears, but she kept them in. Finally, after what felt like hours, Jessica got bored. She tossed the empty notebook at Maylin's feet and checked her reflection in the mirror, fixing her hair like nothing had happened. "Let's go," she said to her friends. "I think she gets the message now." Amber unlocked the door, and the 3 of them walked out laughing. Their voices faded down the hallway, leaving Maylin alone in the bathroom, surrounded by the wreckage of her belongings, For a long moment, she just stood there. She couldn't move. She couldn't think. She felt hollow, like someone had scooped out everything inside her and left nothing but an empty shell. Then her knees gave out, and she slid down the wall until she was sitting on the cold tile floor. And finally, when she was sure no one could hear her, she let herself cry. The sobs came from somewhere deep inside her, ugly and raw and painful. She cried for her ruined drawings and her soaked backpack. She cried for the friends she had left behind and the new life that had turned into a nightmare. She cried because she felt completely and utterly alone. And she didn't know how much more of this she could take. What Mei Lin didn't know, what she couldn't possibly have known, was that she wasn't as alone as she thought. In the first stall, hidden behind a closed door with her feet pulled up on the toilet seat, another girl sat frozen in place. She had been there before Mei Lin walked in, before Jessica and her friends had sprung their trap. And she had witnessed everything. Her name was Ellie, and right now, her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst out of her chest. She had to make a choice. And that choice would change everything. Ellie Park had always been good at being invisible. It was a skill she had developed over 2 years at Westbrook High, a survival strategy that kept her safe in a school where standing out could make you a target. She wasn't popular, but she wasn't unpopular either. She existed somewhere in the middle, in that comfortable gray zone where nobody really noticed you and nobody really bothered you. She liked it that way. It was safe, that Thursday afternoon. Ellie had gone to the bathroom near the east stairwell for the same reason Mei Lin always went there. It was quiet. It was empty. It was the one place in the whole school where you could have a few minutes of peace without anyone watching or judging or expecting anything from you. She had been in the first stall, just scrolling through her phone and enjoying the silence when she heard the main door open. She didn't think much of it at first. Someone else had probably discovered this hidden spot. No big deal, but then she heard Jessica's voice and everything changed. Ellie's entire body went rigid. She knew that voice. Everyone at Westbrook knew that voice. Jessica Reeves was not someone you wanted to cross paths with, especially not when you were alone and vulnerable. Ellie had spent 2 years carefully staying off Jessica's radar, and she wasn't about to blow that now without even thinking. She pulled her feet up onto the toilet seat and wrapped her arms around her knees. She made herself as small as possible, barely breathing, praying that they wouldn't check the stalls. They didn't. Through the crack between the stall door and the frame, Ellie could see everything that happened next. She watched Jessica and her friends corner Mei Lin. She watched them destroy her backpack and rip up her drawings. She heard every cruel word, every mocking laugh, every insult designed to tear that poor girl apart. And she did nothing. Her phone was in her hand. She could have called someone. She could have texted a teacher. She could have burst out of the stall and told them to stop. There were so many things she could have done, but fear had frozen her completely. All she could think about was what would happen if Jessica found out she was there. All those years of careful invisibility would be gone in an instant. She would become the new target, the next victim. Everything she had worked so hard to protect would be destroyed. So she stayed hidden. She stayed silent. And she hated herself for it with every passing second. At some point during those terrible 20 minutes. Ellie's thumb moved across her phone screen almost on its own. She didn't consciously decide to do it. It was like her hand had a mind of its own. Like some part of her knew that what she was witnessing needed to be documented even if she was too scared to stop it. She hit record through the crack in the stall door. Her phone captured everything. The audio was clear enough to hear every word Jessica said. The video was shaky and partially blocked, but you could see enough to understand exactly what was happening. Ellie didn't even realize she had done it until later. In that moment, she was too focused on staying invisible, on surviving, on not becoming the next Mei Lin. Finally, mercifully, it ended. Jessica and her friends left the bathroom laughing, their voices fading down the hallway like the whole thing had been nothing more than entertainment. Like they hadn't just torn another human being to pieces. Ellie stayed frozen in the stall. She heard Mei Lin slide down the wall. She heard the first sob break free, a sound so raw and painful that it made Ellie's chest physically hurt. It was the kind of crying that comes from somewhere deep inside. The kind that sounds more like an animal in pain than a person. Ellie's hand moved to the lock on the stall door. She could open it. She could go to Mei Lin right now and tell her she wasn't alone. She could try to help, try to comfort her, try to make up for doing nothing while those girls tortured her. But what would she even say? Sorry I sat here and watched while they destroyed your things and called you names. Sorry I was too scared to help you. The shame was overwhelming. Ellie couldn't face Mei Lin, not after what she had allowed to happen. So she stayed in the stall, tears streaming silently down her own face, and waited. 10 minutes passed. Maybe 15. Eventually, Ellie heard Mei Lin moving around, gathering what was left of her belongings. She heard the wet squelch of the soaked backpack being picked up off the floor. She heard footsteps moving toward the door, and then the creak of hinges, and then silence. Mei Lin was gone. Ellie waited another 5 minutes just to be safe. Then she finally unlocked the stall door and stepped out. The bathroom looked normal again, except for a few torn pieces of paper in the corner that Mei Lin must have missed. Ellie picked them up. One of them had part of a drawing on it, what looked like the petals of a flower. Delicate and beautiful, even though it was ripped in half. She stared at that piece of paper for a long time. Then she put it in her pocket and walked out of the bathroom. The rest of the school day passed in a blur. Ellie went to her last class, but she didn't hear a word the teacher said. She got on her bus and rode home, but she couldn't remember anything about the trip. Her mind was stuck on replay, going over and over what had happened in that bathroom. She kept thinking about Mei Lin's face, the way she had wrapped her arms around herself like she was trying to hold herself together, the way she had stared at the wall and refused to cry in front of them. There had been something almost heroic about that, Ellie thought, a kind of strength that most people didn't have, and Ellie had just sat there and let it happen. That night, she couldn't eat dinner. Her mom asked if she was feeling okay, and Ellie said she had a headache and went to her room early. She lay on her bed in the dark, staring at the ceiling, feeling like there was a heavy stone sitting on her chest. Around midnight, she finally looked at her phone. The video was still there, 18 minutes and 43 seconds long. She pressed play and watched about 30 seconds of it before she had to stop. Seeing it again, hearing Jessica's voice and Mei Lin's quiet pleas, it made her feel physically sick. She should delete it. That was the smart thing to do. If anyone found out she had this video, if anyone knew she had been there, her life would become a nightmare. Jessica would make sure of that, but something stopped her thumb from hitting the delete button. This video was proof. It was evidence of exactly what Jessica and her friends had done. Without it, it would be Mei Lin's word against theirs. And everyone knew whose word the school would believe. Jessica's father was on the school board. Her family had money and connections. Girls like Mei Lin didn't stand a chance against girls like Jessica. Unless someone had proof, Ellie put her phone down and rolled over, burying her face in her pillow. She didn't know what to do. She didn't know who she was supposed to be. The girl who protected herself at all costs, or the girl who did the right thing even when it was terrifying. She thought about Mei Lin eating lunch alone every day. She thought about the way Mei Lin flinched whenever anyone walked too close to her. She thought about how scared and lonely that girl must feel, and how today had probably made everything 1,000 times worse. And she thought about herself hiding in that stall, watching through a crack in the door, doing absolutely nothing. 3 days. That's how long Ellie would carry this weight before she finally made her choice. 3 days of sleepless nights and guilty conscience, and a video on her phone that felt like it was burning a hole through her pocket. 3 days until everything changed. The first day after the bathroom incident, Ellie told herself she just needed time to think. This was a big decision, and big decisions shouldn't be rushed. She needed to consider all the angles, weigh the pros and cons, figure out the smartest way to handle things. That's what she told herself anyway, but really, she was just scared. She went to school that Friday morning with the video still on her phone and a knot in her stomach that made it hard to breathe. She kept her head down and walked through the hallways like she always did, invisible and unremarkable. But everything felt different now. The fluorescent lights seemed harsher. The noise of the crowded hallways seemed louder, and every time she saw Jessica or Amber or Tiffany, her heart nearly stopped. They looked so normal. That was the thing that got to Ellie the most. Jessica was laughing with her friends by the lockers, like she hadn't destroyed another person's spirit less than 24 hours ago. Amber was complaining about a test she had to take. Tiffany was showing something on her phone to a group of girls, who all leaned in to look. They weren't worried about anything. They weren't losing sleep or feeling guilty or wondering if they had gone too far. To them, what happened in that bathroom was probably already forgotten. Just another fun afternoon. And then Ellie saw Mei Lin. She was walking down the hallway alone, clutching her books to her chest like a shield. Her eyes were red and puffy, like she had been crying recently. Maybe this morning. Maybe all night. She was wearing the same clothes she had worn yesterday. And Ellie realized with a sick feeling that it was probably because her backpack and everything in it had been ruined. Mei Lin walked with her shoulders hunched forward, making herself as small as possible. She flinched when someone brushed past her too quickly. She kept her gaze fixed on the floor, never looking up, never making eye contact with anyone. She looked broken. Ellie wanted to go to her. She wanted to say something, anything, to let Mei Lin know that someone had seen what happened and that someone cared. But her feet wouldn't move. Her voice wouldn't work. She just stood there by her locker, watching Mei Lin disappear around the corner, feeling more ashamed than she had ever felt in her life. The second day was Saturday. Ellie stayed in her room most of the day, telling her parents she had a lot of homework. But she didn't do any homework. She just sat on her bed, staring at her phone, thinking. She had looked up what happens to bullies when they get caught. She had read stories online about girls like Jessica who got suspended or expelled, whose reputations were ruined, whose futures were changed forever. Some of those stories made her feel hopeful. Maybe justice was possible. Maybe people like Jessica didn't always win, but she had also read other stories. Stories about witnesses who came forward and ended up being targeted themselves. Stories about schools that didn't believe victims. Stories about powerful families who made problems disappear with money and connections. Jessica's father was on the school board. Everyone knew that. He showed up at games and assemblies, shaking hands with teachers and administrators like he owned the place. What would happen if Ellie came forward with her video? Would the school actually do something? Or would they find a way to make it all go away? And what would happen to her? Jessica had eyes everywhere. If she found out Ellie had been in that bathroom, if she found out Ellie was the one who turned her in, there would be consequences. Ellie had seen what Jessica could do to someone she barely knew. She didn't want to imagine what Jessica would do to someone who had betrayed her. By Saturday night, Ellie had almost convinced herself to delete the video. It was the safest choice. The smart choice. She could just pretend none of this had ever happened and go back to her comfortable, invisible life. But then she opened her phone one more time, and instead of going to the video, she went to social media. She searched for Mei Lin's name, not really knowing why. She found her profile. It was mostly private, but a few things were visible. An old photo of Mei Lin with a group of girls, probably friends from her old school, all of them smiling and happy. A drawing she had posted months ago, before she moved, a beautiful sketch of a sunset over water, and a short bio that said simply, "I like art in quiet places." Ellie stared at that screen for a long time. This was a real person. A person with friends she missed, and art she loved, and dreams she probably had for the future. A person who had done nothing wrong except be new and different and alone, and now that person was suffering. And Ellie was the only one who could help her. The third day was Sunday. Ellie woke up early, before anyone else in her house. She lay in bed watching the sun come up through her window, and she thought about the kind of person she wanted to be. All her life, she had played it safe. She had stayed invisible, stayed quiet, stayed out of trouble. She had watched other people get bullied and told herself it wasn't her business. She had looked the other way because looking the other way was easier than getting involved, but where had that gotten her? She was 16 years old, and she didn't have a single close friend. She was so focused on not being noticed that she had never let anyone actually see her. She was safe, sure, But she was also alone, and now she had a chance to do something that mattered. Something brave. Something that might actually make a difference in another person's life. Was she really going to let that chance pass because she was scared? Ellie got out of bed. She took a shower and got dressed, putting on her nicest clothes like she was preparing for something important. She went downstairs and ate breakfast with her family, even though she could barely taste the food. Her mom asked if she was feeling better, and Ellie said yes. Even though her hands were shaking under the table, she spent the rest of Sunday going over the video, making sure it was clear enough to show what happened. She wrote down everything she remembered from that day, every word she had heard, every detail she could recall. She wanted to be prepared. She wanted to make sure that when she told her story, no one could say she was making it up. That night, she barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Mei Lin's face. She heard Jessica's cruel laughter. She felt the weight of what she was about to do pressing down on her chest like a stone. But underneath all the fear, there was something else. Something that felt almost like relief. For the first time in 3 days, she knew what she was going to do. The uncertainty was gone. The decision was made. Monday morning came too fast and not fast enough. Ellie got to school early before most other students had arrived. The hallways were quiet and empty, her footsteps echoing off the walls as she walked toward the main office. Principal Harrison was already in his office. She could see him through the glass window, sitting at his desk looking at something on his computer. He was a tall man with gray hair and glasses, known for being strict but fair. Ellie had never spoken to him directly before. She had never had a reason to. She stood outside his door for a full minute, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. She could still turn around. She could still walk away and pretend this never happened, but then she thought about Mei Lin. She thought about that broken look on her face. She thought about what it must feel like to be that alone, that scared, that hopeless. Ellie took a deep breath. She raised her hand. As she knocked on the door. When Principal Harrison looked up and waved her in, Ellie walked into his office and placed her phone on his desk. "I need to show you something," she said. Her voice was shaking, but the words came out clear. "And I need to tell you that I was there when it happened. I watched the whole thing and I didn't do anything to stop it. I'm sorry for that. But I'm here now, and I want to help make it right." Principal Harrison watched the video in complete silence. Ellie sat across from him, her hands folded tightly in her lap, watching his face change as the footage played. His expression went from confusion to concern to something that looked like barely controlled anger. When it was over, he took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes for a long moment. "How long ago did this happen?" he asked quietly. "Thursday," Ellie said. "Last Thursday afternoon." He nodded slowly, like he was processing something heavy. Then he looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You said you were there?" "In the bathroom. When this happened." Ellie felt her face flush with shame. "Yes, I was in one of the stalls. I heard them come in, and I was scared, so I hid. I watched the whole thing, and I didn't do anything to stop it." She paused, her voice cracking. "I know I should have. I know that. But I was afraid of what they would do to me." She expected him to be angry. She expected a lecture about responsibility and doing the right thing. But instead, Principal Harrison just looked at her with something that almost seemed like understanding. "It took courage to come here today," he said. "A lot of people would have deleted that video and pretended they never saw anything. You didn't do that. That matters." Ellie didn't feel courageous. She felt 3 days too late. But she nodded anyway and waited to see what would happen next. What happened next spread through Westbrook, high, faster than anything had ever spread before. By lunchtime, Jessica, Amber, and Tiffany had been called to the principal's office. By the end of the school day, all 3 of them had been suspended pending a formal investigation. Word got around that there was video evidence, that someone had recorded the whole thing, that the girls were in serious trouble this time. Nobody knew it was Ellie, at least not at first. Jessica's father showed up at the school the next morning, red-faced and demanding answers. Ellie heard later that he had threatened to sue the school. to have Principal Harrison fired, to make this whole thing disappear. But the video was undeniable. There was no explaining it away, no spinning it into something innocent. Everyone could see exactly what his daughter had done. The investigation took about a week. During that time, something unexpected happened. Other students started coming forward. It turned out Mei Lin wasn't the first person Jessica and her friends had targeted. She was just the latest in a long line of victims who had been too scared to speak up. A girl named Grace told the principal about the time. Jessica had spread rumors about her that made her afraid to come to school. A boy named Kevin talked about how Amber and Tiffany had mocked him every day for a month until he begged his parents to let him transfer. One by one, the stories piled up, and it became clear that what happened to Mei Lin wasn't an isolated incident. It was a pattern. By the end of the second week, all 3 girls had been expelled. Jessica's family moved away before the semester ended. Ellie heard they went to some private school in another state, probably hoping for a fresh start somewhere nobody knew what Jessica had done. Amber and Tiffany ended up at different schools too. Just like that, they were gone. But that wasn't the part that left everyone speechless. About 3 weeks after the incident became public, Principal Harrison announced a special assembly. The whole school gathered in the auditorium, buzzing with curiosity about what was going on. Teachers lined the walls, looking serious. The energy in the room felt different somehow, like everyone knew something important was about to happen. Ellie sat in the 3rd row, her heart beating fast. She had been asked to attend, though she didn't know why. She still hadn't told anyone except Principal Harrison that she was the one who had recorded the video. Part of her wanted to keep it that way forever. The auditorium went quiet when Mei Lin walked onto the stage. She looked different than she had a few weeks ago. She was still thin, still quiet, still the same girl who had eaten lunch alone in the corner of the cafeteria. But something in her eyes had changed. She stood up straighter. She held her head higher. When she stepped up to the microphone, her hands were trembling, but her voice was steady. "Most of you don't know me," she began. "I'm the new girl. I transferred here in October, and for the first 6 weeks I didn't really talk to anyone. Some of you probably didn't even know my name." She paused and took a breath. 3 weeks ago, something happened to me in a bathroom on the east side of the building. Some of you have probably heard about it by now. I'm not going to go into the details because honestly, I don't want to relive them. But I want to tell you what it felt like. The auditorium was completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. It felt like I was disappearing, Mei Lin continued. Like every mean word and every cruel laugh was erasing a little bit more of who I was. By the time it was over, I didn't know if there was anything left of me. I went home that night and I thought about just giving up. Not on life, but on everything else. On school, on trying to make friends. On believing that things could ever get better. Ellie felt tears burning in her eyes. She had never heard Mei Lin speak this many words at once. She had never seen this kind of strength from someone who had seemed so broken. But then something happened, Mei Lin said. Someone came forward. Someone who had seen what happened to me and decided to tell the truth, even though it was scary. Even though it would have been easier to stay quiet. Mei Lin looked out at the audience, and her eyes found Ellie in the 3rd row. "I know who you are," she said directly to her. "Principal Harrison told me, and I want you to know that I'm not angry at you for not stopping it. I understand why you were scared. I probably would have been scared too." Ellie couldn't breathe. The tears were falling freely now, streaming down her face. "You were 3 days late," Mei Lin continued, her own voice breaking. "But you came. You found your courage. And that courage gave me something I thought I had lost forever. It gave me my voice back." She turned back to the whole audience. "So I want to say 2 things before I finish. First, to anyone out there who is being bullied, who feels alone, who thinks nobody sees what you're going through, please hear me. You are not invisible. You matter. And even when it feels like the whole world is against you, there is always someone who cares. Sometimes they're just too scared to show it yet." She paused. "And second, to anyone who has ever watched something bad happen and did nothing, I want you to know it's not too late. It's never too late to make the right choice. You might be scared. You might think it's not your business. You might tell yourself that someone else will handle it. But the truth is, you have the power to change someone's life. Please don't waste it. The auditorium erupted in applause. Students stood up, teachers wiped their eyes, and for the first time since she had arrived at Westbrook High, Mei Lin smiled. After the assembly, Ellie found Mei Lin in the hallway. They stood there for a moment, not knowing what to say. Then Mei Lin reached out and pulled Ellie into a hug. "Thank you," she whispered. They didn't become best friends overnight. Trust takes time to build, and some wounds take years to fully heal. But they did become friends, eventually. They started a peer support group at Westbrook that grew to over 50 members by the time they graduated. They helped other students who were being bullied, other witnesses who didn't know how to speak up years later. When people asked Mei Lin about that day in the bathroom, she always said the same thing. The bullies trapped me in there. But the girl who was too scared to help became the girl who saved me. She taught me that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about deciding that something matters more than your fear. And Ellie, whenever she heard that, would smile and think about the choice she almost didn't make, the choice that changed everything.